All right, event number 5, the straw that breaks the camel's back, if you will, is the election of 1860. Um, the election of 1860 is very divisive. When you look at the map, you can see that there are pretty clear lines along how people were voting. The big issue here, it goes back to how we elect our presidents. So we elect presidents in this country based on the Electoral College, right? So each state gets the number of electors equal to the number of congressmen they have. So that means how many representatives, and then they get 2, because every state gets 2 senators. So if I look at the map and I look at Pennsylvania, they have 27 electors, which means they had 25 representatives and 2 senators. So what happens is we go and we vote, right? So people in Pennsylvania go and they vote, and the presidential candidate with the most votes in that state takes all of their electoral votes. So in this case, Abraham Lincoln won the state of Pennsylvania, and so he is going to take all 27 electoral votes. So that's how it works. Now, there was a split in the Democratic-Republican Party. In the Democrat Party. So Douglas and Breckinridge split that party into 2, and Lincoln is the only Republican. So the Republican Party is pretty unified, and he's going to win really easily. Another reason that he wins very easily is because of the distribution of population. So earlier this week, you looked at that chart, and the population, the North is going to have about 19 million people by 1860. The South is going to have about 12 million people, but a third of that, 4 million of them, are slaves, which can't vote. So there's a huge disproportion of representation in Congress because in favor of the North, because the North has so many more people. They have a much larger representation in the House of Representatives, which means they're going to get more electoral votes. So when you look at that map, Lincoln doesn't carry a single southern state, and he wins by a landslide. And so when we come out of this election, the South is really going to start thinking about, we didn't vote for this guy. None of us voted for this guy. There's no way we can overrun what the North wants in presidential elections because we don't have the numbers. So if we don't have the numbers in presidential elections and we don't have the numbers in Congress, that's 2 of the 3 branches of governments that we don't have a voice. And we are really super afraid that what they want is just going to start happening, they being the North. So this issue of something called states' rights starts to really pop up, right? The South is saying the North has the numbers to pretty much do anything they want to us, and that's not okay. Way back when we formed as a country, the states came together to create a nation. And the nation needs to be working on behalf of all of those states. And if it's not working, then the state should have the right to leave. So what happens is Lincoln is elected in November of 1860. He doesn't take office until March of 1861. And by the time that he takes office, 7 states had seceded, S-E-C-E-D-E-D, not succeeded like victory, but secede means to leave. 7 states had left the Union, okay? And they had created their own country called the Confederate States of America. They had no intention of going to war at that point. They just were like, this whole United States of America thing isn't quite working for us. We're going to create our own government where we have power and the ability to establish what states can and can't do. So they created their own country. This was South Carolina, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. They elected their own president. They created their own Congress. They wrote their own constitution. They were, in their eyes, a country. The North views it a little differently. They are going to say things like, you do not have the right to leave the country. We are all one country. By creating another government, that is a violation of the United States Constitution, right? And so we're going to have this big argument, these big political arguments for a pretty short period of time before it turns into a military issue over the issue of what states can and can't not do. That's called states' rights. One of those issues will be slavery, but it's really bigger than that, right? What can states do and what can they not do? Yes, can we determine whether or not they have slaves, but do they have the right to leave the Union? We've never dealt with that issue before. And so here we are in March of 1861 trying to figure that out. It's not going to take long before this shifts from a political issue to a military issue, because in April of 1861, the first shots are going to be fired at Fort Sumter in South Carolina. And Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee will leave after that, bringing the total number of states up to 11, and pretty much the entire South. If you look back up at the map, it's all those states in green. And we're going to start rolling into to this war. And the North and the South are going to fight for very different reasons. So that's where we are. So the election of 1860 is really the straw that breaks the camel's back when the South sees that they have very little power in government, both in the in the executive and legislative branch. They just see the only way out is to create their own government. And so they do, and they leave, and they create their own country called the Confederate States of America. And then a month down the road, we're going to end up in the Civil War.